Hi, folks. Welcome back. This is episode 2 of Post Christian, and thanks so much for coming. For me to make this work, doing the video vlog, I have to find a way to do it unscripted, off the cuff, without notes, and one take. Because I'm a very busy person right now. I'm building this cottage that takes a huge amount of time, and I'm working on a novel. I'm reading books. I'm studying, and I'm just a very busy guy. And the reason I started doing the vlog, because I've been blogging for, as mentioned before, for about 15 or 20 years, is I'm hoping I can find a way for me to do this novel right now that's going to address the issue of abortion. It's probably the number one issue in our culture wars. It got Donald Trump elected in 2016, so it's a very important issue. So I want to dive into it through the life of some individuals, and in a very deep way. There's going to be things that both pro-life and pro-choice people will like, and there's going to be things that they both will dislike, I think. But it's going to be a very honest book. Anyway, this is not a commercial for that either, because that book won't be out for another year at least. So I want to mirror my written blog with this vlog. This will be shorter. I'm trying to keep these down to 15 minutes, and I meant to bring a clock, and now I already forgot that. So I have to watch myself. I can get quite winded with words. Quite wordy is what I meant. So trying to explain a little bit what I'm doing, and I in my written blog, I will put a link if you want to get into the 4 pages of background story. But in my written blog, I describe what I see myself doing through these things. And just imagine for a moment, I know last time I told you to imagine that this was an old church that's being turned into a house because Christianity is dying in America. But think of the Christian culture as the Titanic, this huge, beautiful ship. But now it's listing, it's in trouble. In the 90s, when I first came back to the church, I thought I could help save the church. And I found out the hard way, after a lot of scars, being screamed at, almost being punched in the face by people in churches, that there's no way. I don't think there's any way to save the church. It's going to decline, just like it did in Europe. It's going to decline, and there's no revival that's going to happen that's going to fix it. But you have to separate out the historical Jesus, the simple message, from this massive Titanic. And that's going to be one of my goals, is trying to separate those two out. So imagine that the Christian culture is the Titanic. And so most of the people love Sunday morning church service. These are the people in the dining hall of the Titanic, people in the music hall listening to classical music. They don't know that I don't know if they don't know or don't care. A lot of them don't care. Some of them care. They see their own children leave Christianity, their grandchildren, and they start to care. But there's, this intrinsic thing, whether you're Catholic, Protestant, one of the 120 Protestant churches, Orthodox, that your church is God's church. This is God, this organization, the Titanic, is God's instrument. I don't see it that way anymore. I see the historical Jesus as like the Steinway piano in the heart of this Titanic. It's playing beautiful, beautiful music, but the rest of it is all extraneous. It's not evil. As I said, I belong to a church, wonderful people, and there's some benefits into a large church, because our church has a lot of community service programs that a small church or even a bunch of Christians who meet in a bar could do it. So there's advantages. So it's amoral. It can be good or it can be bad, but it's not the essence. And if you're a person who likes Sunday morning church and the traditional church and you love your church, I think good for you. That's great. But in reality, there's more and more people who don't like that culture. Uh, I heard some Generation Z people talking about they don't want to go to church because it feels like a trap. That once they go, they're going to be lassoed, pulled in. And once you're pulled in, there's these restraints on thinking that happen. Certain things you cannot say, not just like shit, damn, and hell, but certain ideas you can't say. And I would love to do an experiment in especially a conservative church, right in the middle of church, any prayer requests? Yeah. Why in the hell do we believe in God? Why? Why? Where's the evidence? They would just be horrified, grab their pearls, they'd drag you out and say, what's wrong with you? But there's certain things you can't say in a church, certain ideas you can't raise. That's part of this culture. 2,000 years of building this culture. And when I went back and studied church history, I found these horrible, horrible, horrible things that were done, Inquisition, wars. They think anywhere between 100 and 200 million people have been murdered by the Christian church, and many more. And this is not just, the Protestants, that's the Catholics, the Inquisition, the Catholics are bad people. They have the Pope, they're all working for the devil. That's just not true. Look at the 30 Years' War, and you'll see that Protestants were blowing up and killing people and chopping their heads off just as much. But the church is not pure evil. But the people who are leaving the church and leaving Christianity for good, they just jump off the side of the Titanic into this water, cold, cold water, and I call it in my blog the sea of nihilism. I think that's what motivates me, is this sea of nihilism. I have a son who'd worked through certain periods of his life, and he had a big sign in his apartment that said, I can't remember now how it said, but something like, life is meaningless and then you die. And that's nihilism. That's what's left. That's what concerns me. I'm not worried about the fires of hell. Actually, living in nihilism, I think, could be worse than hell. To think that life has no purpose, no meaning, and no morals. Now, I've talked to atheist friends and say, oh no, my life is full of meaning, existential meaning that they create themselves, morals that they create themselves. And certainly, if you look like at the Ten Commandments, I know atheists are much more moral than people who claim to be Christians. If you look at it for Ten Commandments, but I think rationally, when you give up, and this is what happened to me when I was approaching atheism, I realized to be honest about atheism in the same way as being honest about Christianity, there's only nihilism. I'm sorry. If the cosmos came into being by a freak accident, and then everything since then has developed through freak accidents, stars have made atoms of different things that got together that, finally created life, and here we are. You cannot either add meaning or morals to that situation. So here are these people, they're leaving the church, they're jumping into the sea of nihilism. And I see myself only as the guy, the coxswain, I think is the official title, who mans the lifeboats, who gets them ready, takes the covers off, gets the people in and drops them into the sea. Or maybe I'm in this water with them, because I've been in the water. I know what it's like. And saying, wait a minute, before you drown in nihilism, here's a lifeboat. And I want to help you get on this lifeboat. You don't have to go back to the ship. The people on the ship will say, you're a bad person because you're not in the church. You're a very bad person. You'll hear that if you go back. And I'm saying, no, you're not. All you need is to understand who Jesus was and his teachings. He's the baby grand Steinway making this beautiful music inside the Titanic. Guess what? That baby grand will fit in a lifeboat, and that's going to be the photo I put with today's talk, if I can do it right. So I'm trying to say, here's the lifeboat, and Jesus fits in the lifeboat. But go back and study the Beatitudes. Go back and study where Jesus talks about just look for the parable of the goats and sheep and just listen to the values that Jesus had in contrast to what we're seeing today, especially in our government that's been taken over by conservative Christians who want to execute homosexuals, who want to execute immigrants, who want to throw away, to cut all programs to help poor and help the hungry around the world. These are Christians behind this. And it's totally incongruent with the teachings of Jesus of history. So that's what my goal is. Going forward, I'm going to be doing this deconstruction of Christian culture. When I went through my breakaway from Christianity, I was living in Cairo, Egypt. We had virtually no American friends where we were living. We were living, I would call, a slum. It was a very hard place to live. My rent was $300 a month, and that's about what we got in Egypt. But the culture, for the first time in my life, I really understood how much culture shapes the way that you think. And I'll give one little illustration of this, is that we had 3 little boys at the time, and I would go out in the street, just like we do in the States. Matter of fact, I had my granddaughter, we were putting our granddaughter on her neck yesterday. And you go down in the street, and every time I did it, some stranger would run up to me screaming at me. And I think, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? And they would take my child and put one leg here and one leg behind me on sideways. And that felt really weird. And it happened again and happened again and happened again. And I went to my neighbor, Egyptian neighbor, and I said, help me to understand why people are screaming at me. You're not very smart. You do not know that if you put a child on both sides, it will break your spine and you'll have back trouble and neck trouble for the rest of your life. But come on one side, it's okay. So those people were just trying to be helpful. I don't know where they got their information. I think the basis of that is just not true. I don't think there's any evidence of that. But it's just how deep culture controls the way that we think. And it's very, very hard. And I wish the church wasn't this way. They make it, you're in the Titanic or you're nothing. There's no middle ground. If you're not in the organized church, you're garbage. And they make it very difficult. But when you're in the organized church, it becomes conformity. You must believe all the things that we believe. And 98%, and that's what I'm going to be doing in future weeks, of the things that you must believe have nothing to do with the Bible, nothing to do with Jesus. It's 2,000 years of church history. And I don't want to go down other tangents, but just one idea is the age of the earth. James Hutton was a Scottish farmer, medical doctor. He was a Renaissance man, very bright. I think at Sicca Point, I may have mentioned this before, he took a boat out. And he started, his naturals, really interested in nature. And he looked at these rock formations. There's a thing in geology called the unconformity. And I won't go into that here. But he was observing it and being a very intelligent man. And I agree with him 100%. He said, I'm sorry, the earth is not 6,000 years old. It would have taken millions of years to create this form. Now, these young earth creationists say, it's the worldwide flood. No, you cannot get this with a worldwide flood. And the church was outraged at him. And this is one of many things where the church started to hate science, demonize right and conspiracy theories. Scientists are stupid. Scientists are working for the devil. So this is just one of those evolution, the age of the earth. And this was based on tradition. That before him, there's a bishop also in Scotland who declared the day that the earth was created 6,000 years ago. So he broke with tradition. So I'm trying to separate these things out, tradition and things that have nothing to do with Jesus and what Jesus said. That's what I'm going to be doing going forward. So I'm going to end now. I hope I didn't use more than 15 minutes, but there's 2 major issues that the church is having today. It had it in the Middle Ages, Dark Ages, I call it. I think it was dark. And the Dark Ages really ended with the person of Thomas Aquinas, I believe. There's others. History's never that simple. But Thomas Aquinas was one of these brilliant thinkers that comes along, I think, every 1,000 years or more or less, maybe every 2,000 or 3,000 years. But he was a prolific writer. I'm trying to work my way through Summa Theologica, his 6,000-page book, and I'm reading it very, very slowly. But Thomas Aquinas re-injected two things that the church had gotten wrong for 1,000 years, well, more than 1,000 years. They had a lot of cults that formed around Jesus, like the Gnostics, the Arians, all these people that had very different views, very fundamentalist philosophical views that were quite different. But some of those ended up influencing the church, and two of those, they're sort of tied together, is human reason. Thomas Aquinas said, human reason is divine. It's given by God to humans to find truth. Now today, I got in big trouble when I wrote in my blog. Oh no, it wasn't that one. It was when I was in a small group and I simply said, reason is very important to me. And within minutes, I got an email from someone mansplaining to me, if you know what mansplaining is to me, that my relationship with God is no good if you use reason because God is irrational. Bullshit. I'm sorry. I just don't believe that. That's just not true. But Thomas Aquinas said reason is given by God. It's not perfect. It's not perfect, but it's very, very good for finding truth. And then the other thing, he elevated nature back up. When I say nature, people think of trees and birds. What he meant was reality. The material world had been, from this Gnostics and Arians, they saw the material world as something nasty. In college, we used the word worldly. We didn't study in college because I was in this group that's sort of like a cult that said, no, that's worldly to study history or science, or you just go and take your test and God will give you A's if God wants you to pass. How stupid is that? But anyway, this left the church now in a place that especially the conservative church is the best home for conspiracy theories. I could go on for hours of all the conspiracy theories I've I've heard from my conservative Christian friends. Joe Biden runs the biggest pedophile operation in the world. He and Hillary Clinton worked together on that. All elections since Kennedy have been stolen by Democrats that were won by Democrats. Climate change is absolutely false, that the world is cooling down. And scientists want you to believe in climate change because they're in cahoots with the Chinese electric car makers or something like that. And it's conspiracy theory after conspiracy theory after conspiracy theory, nonsense you hear inside the church. And it's because of this downward valuation of human reason. They don't believe in human reason. They don't believe in evidence anymore. It just made up stories. And I talk about this because this is one of the fundamental reasons why people are leaving Christianity for good, because of the nonsense and bullshit. And the other one with nature, the people, Russell Voigt, who is the writer of Project 2025, who's now the director of the government's Office of Management and OMB and budget, management budget. He controls the purse strings and the interests of the government. He's a Christian nationalist, and the Christian nationalists don't give a crap about this earth. It's garbage. God's going to burn it up. I remember as a kid watching someone in Appalachia dump a truckload of garbage into the woods. And it bothered me. And I was like 5 years old. My mom said, oh, it's okay. God's going to burn this planet up pretty soon anyway. So those two issues, reason and the value of reality, not just nature, not just trees and birds and things, but reality, the material world, devaluing those things, devaluing reason. It's why Christianity's gotten so much trouble and why I think it's dying. You guys have a great week. Thanks for coming. I'll keep exploring these ideas as we go ahead.